I stood outside my own home, my hand trembling on the doorknob as my heart pounded dangerously in my chest. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter and whispered conversations from the other side of the door. My mind screamed at me not to push it open, not to look inside, not to shatter the life I thought I had. And yet, something unrelenting, an awful, powerful curiosity, kept me rooted there, compelled to see what was happening within those walls. I knew my world was about to turn upside down. Everything I believed in, everyone I trusted, was moments away from betrayal. But I had no idea just how deep this deception ran. Welcome to the night I exposed my wife's secret and came face to face with the biggest shock of my life. This is not a story you might have heard before. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and a raw, twisted truth that will leave you questioning how well you truly know the people closest to you. If you think you can handle the weight of what you're about to read, if you dare to keep your eyes open to every single devastating detail, then stay with me until the end. Let's begin. My name is Mark Roberts, and until a few weeks ago, I was an average suburban husband. I had the 9-to-5 office job, the sports car I only took out on weekends, and a beautifully modest home in a quiet neighborhood. Most importantly, I had a wife whom I loved with all my heart. Her name is Sarah. She was my world. We married young. She was 23, I was 25, and for the next 6 years I believed we had the most blissful marriage one could imagine. Sarah wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend, my confidant, my comfort in times of stress. She had this ethereal presence, a contagious laugh, and a caring spirit. People would often tell me how lucky I was, and I'd always respond the same way. I know I'm lucky. I wake up next to her every single morning. We hosted barbecue parties in our backyard, visited her parents' lake house every summer, and planned for a future that involved kids, a dog or two, and maybe even a picket fence. I was content. No, more than content. I was genuinely happy, blissfully unaware that a storm was about to crash into my perfect life. In our social circle, Sarah's best friend was Emily Carson. Emily was everything Sarah wasn't. She was bold, a little wild, and unafraid to say the first thing on her mind. She was the sort who would dance on a bar top if dared, or book a random solo trip to Paris just to experience the nightlife. Despite being total opposites, Sarah and Emily had formed an unbreakable bond in college. I was never threatened by Emily. I admired her free spirit, and I appreciated how she always encouraged Sarah to chase her dreams. They were sisters at heart, and over the years, Emily had become a close friend of mine too, or so I thought. She was at our house practically every weekend, joking that our place felt more like home to her than her own apartment. Mi casa es tu casa, I'd always say when Emily arrived, to which she'd respond with a grin. Little did I know that very phrase, my home is your home, would later haunt me when I discovered Emily had turned our house into her secret hideaway. The cracks in my perfect life started innocently. A suspicious late-night text, a few unexpected outings, snippets of hushed conversations. I never once suspected my wife had the capacity to betray me. But eventually, the evidence became too glaring to ignore. It said that a husband always notices when something is off about his wife, and I'm inclined to believe that. Sarah's behavior changed in microscopic ways at first. She started sleeping with her phone under her pillow, taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She seemed more jumpy whenever a text message arrived. She began wearing more perfume on casual outings, something she would typically save for special date nights with me. When I asked about it, she shrugged. "Just in the mood for it," she'd say, forcing a playful smile that somehow felt guarded. I brushed it off initially. After all, people go through phases. Maybe she was exploring new scents or wanted to feel more confident. I told myself it was nothing, until it wasn't. Then there were the weekend girls' nights that appeared out of nowhere. She'd claim Emily wanted to try a new bar or check out an art exhibit. Sometimes they'd come back late, with Sarah reeking of cigarettes despite her not being a smoker. Emily was a smoker, though, so maybe that explained it, or so I told myself. I did not want to become the cliched jealous husband who suspects his wife of cheating whenever she left the house. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. I'd ask, "So, how was your night?" And Sarah would give me generic responses. "We had fun," or "It was okay," just the usual. She never elaborated, and I felt the distance between us growing inch by inch. There was a time she would come home from a simple coffee run and talk excitedly for half an hour about the new latte flavors or the funny barista behind the counter. Now, she was holding back. I began wondering if there might be someone else. A coworker, maybe? Or a random guy she met at a bar? In my wildest imagination, the last person I'd suspect was Emily. Emily, who was practically family to us. Emily, who had confided in me about her heartbreaks and illusions of romance. Emily, who was always beaming with pride whenever she saw Sarah and me together. I felt a creeping paranoia as I scrolled through social media. Sarah's feed used to be filled with pictures of us together. Couple selfies, dinner dates, silly home moments. Lately, she had posted almost nothing. She had gone from an open book to a locked diary, and I didn't know how to find the key. One day, in a moment of desperation, I snooped. I know it's wrong to go through your spouse's belongings without permission, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly amiss. I rummaged through her phone bill and noticed an unusual number of texts to Emily. Again, it didn't raise immediate red flags. Sarah and Emily had always been close. But we're talking about hundreds of messages in a span of days, at odd hours of the night, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. That was strange, even for best friends. That same week, I came home early from work one afternoon, feeling under the weather, and heard giggles in the guest room. My heart soared with relief. Maybe Sarah and Emily were just goofing around, having a typical girls' day, and I was the paranoid husband suspecting something outlandish. I walked down the hall, pushing the door ajar. Sure enough, Sarah and Emily were there, seated on the bed with Netflix paused on the screen. They looked startled as I opened the door, though. Emily's face turned pale, and Sarah looked like a deer in headlights. Then, in a split second, Sarah forced a bright smile. "Mark, you're home early," she said, her voice a pitch higher than usual. Emily chimed in. "Hey, Mark. Everything okay?" She sounded normal enough, but I didn't miss the slight tension hanging in the air. I tried to look casual, ignoring the knot in my stomach. "Yeah, just feeling a bit sick. Thought I'd come home and rest." They both nodded, and I noticed Sarah subtly repositioning herself on the bed, making sure there was space between her and Emily. My eyes drifted to the comforter. It was messy, like they had been lying close together. But that could just be them relaxing, right? Still, something about Emily's expression felt guarded. "We're just watching some random show," Sarah added, quickly pressing play without giving me a chance to ask more questions. The tension in the room was suddenly stifling. After a moment, I muttered a quick goodbye and headed to our bedroom, telling myself I was crazy to suspect anything. They were best friends who often hung out like that. Besides, I still believed wholeheartedly that Sarah was incapable of such betrayal. Looking back, I recognized that day as one of several turning points, moments where I almost uncovered the truth. But it's easy to see clearly in hindsight. At the time, denial was my shield. A couple of weeks passed, and Sarah's behavior only grew more bizarre. She started receiving phone calls late at night and would walk out onto the porch to take them. On 2 separate occasions, she lied about her whereabouts. Once, she claimed she was at Emily's house when, after calling Emily out of curiosity, I discovered Emily was in a different city visiting her parents. Another time, Sarah said she was working late at the office. I drove down to surprise her with dinner, only to find her cubicle dark and empty. I confronted her about these inconsistencies, She brushed them off with poorly constructed excuses. I forgot Emily canceled on me, so I ran errands instead. Or the office lost power, so they sent me home early. I didn't want to bother you. With each hollow explanation, the trust I had in her chipped away. And yet, the last thing I wanted to do was accuse her of cheating. There's a certain fear in confronting the possibility that your entire marriage might be built on a lie. My imagination conjured up all manner of horrifying scenarios, images of Sarah kissing a stranger, holding him, whispering sweet nothings. But no matter what scenario I dreamt up, I never once pictured it being Emily, her best friend. That was beyond my realm of suspicion. But then Emily began acting strangely too. She became more distant with me. Once so warm and playful, she now avoided eye contact whenever I was around. If she and Sarah were in the same room, they exchanged quick, knowing glances that dissipated the moment I entered. If I invited Emily to join us for dinner, she'd often decline or make some lame excuse to leave early. A voice in the back of my mind started screaming, "Something is definitely going on here." The question was what? If it was just a fling, why involve Emily so heavily? Or was Emily covering for Sarah's clandestine affair? Maybe that was it. Maybe Sarah was seeing someone else and Emily was the alibi. That explanation felt more plausible than the two of them being romantically involved with each other. Still, there were late nights when my mind spun out of control, and I wondered, what if it was them? What if Sarah and Emily's relationship went beyond the boundaries of mere friendship? I'd never known Sarah to have any attraction to women, but we are complicated creatures. We rarely even understand ourselves sometimes, let alone others. It was a terrifying thought, but I pushed it aside, convinced it was nothing more than my paranoid imagination. Eventually, the not knowing became unbearable. I decided that if I really wanted to maintain my sanity, I needed hard evidence. Proof that my suspicions were either unfounded or that my worst fears were true. And so I did something I'm not proud of. I installed a small security camera in our living room, disguised in a potted plant near the TV. I told myself it was purely for safety. Our neighborhood wasn't exactly high crime, but we'd heard about a few recent burglaries. If I caught Sarah doing something suspicious on camera, I rationalized, that would be on her, not me. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. For days, the camera captured nothing out of the ordinary. Sarah and I bickering about laundry, the two of us making dinner, Emily stopping by once to borrow a book. Nothing raised a red flag. Yet I refused to remove it, partly because I was still worried about break-ins, but mostly because I had an uneasy feeling it was only a matter of time before something happened. Then, one Monday afternoon, I was stuck at the office late. Sarah had claimed she was going out with Emily for drinks and dinner, nothing unusual about that. While sitting in my cubicle, I received an alert on my phone that motion was detected in the living room. Curious, I opened the camera feed. Sarah was home, rummaging around the living room, checking her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her hair. I stared at the phone in confusion. Why was she home alone when she said she'd be out? Moments later, the front door opened. In walked Emily. My pulse quickened. They were both supposed to be out at some trendy bar, or so Sarah had told me. Instead, they were here, together, alone. I swallowed hard, telling myself they might have just changed plans and decided to hang out at home. My eyes were glued to the tiny screen, the resolution not great, but enough for me to see them greet each other with a hug. Then something else happened. Emily brushed her fingers through Sarah's hair, and Sarah leaned in. They lingered in that position for a moment, gazing into each other's eyes in a way that was unmistakably intimate. My breath caught in my throat. Was I seeing this right? My mind was screaming 1,000 thoughts at once. This can't be real. Maybe it's just a friendly hug. Don't jump to conclusions. But what I saw next obliterated any shred of denial. Emily cupped Sarah's face gently, and Sarah kissed her, fully, deeply, and with an unmistakable passion that lovers share. I dropped my phone in shock, my heart hammering. My wife. My wife was kissing her best friend in our living room. The feed on the phone kept playing. I could hear the faint rustling of clothing. I couldn't bear to watch more, but I couldn't tear my eyes away either. My entire world blurred into a haze of heartbreak, confusion, and anger. Those next few seconds felt like an eternity. I froze in my office chair, struggling to breathe, certain I was about to pass out from sheer emotional overload. My entire married life, the dinners, the vacations, the I love yous, flashed before me, suddenly cast in a sinister new light. How long had they been doing this behind my back? How blind was I not to see it? I snapped out of my daze and yanked out my earbuds, not wanting to hear the continued betrayal. The raw pain of that moment is something I'd never wish on anyone. It felt like a scalding iron pressed into my chest, leaving a permanent scar. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to rage, but I was in a quiet office, surrounded by unsuspecting colleagues. I rushed out of the building, tears stinging my eyes, telling my supervisor I had a family emergency. The drive home was a blur of near collisions and screeching tires. Rage fueled me, but so did a twisted sadness. We had talked about having children soon. We had built this entire life plan. But apparently the woman I adored, the woman I thought I knew so intimately, was also intimately involved with someone else, her own best friend. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was dark. I saw Emily's car parked there, confirming they were still inside. I wanted to barge in, confront them, and scream my lungs out. But a part of me hesitated, not sure I was emotionally ready to see what might be waiting for me inside. For a moment, I considered just leaving, to head to a bar and drink my sorrows away. But no, I couldn't run. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Cautiously, I approached the front door and stood silently, listening. My heart pounded as I heard muffled voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying. Then came light laughter, followed by a hushed whisper. I pressed my ear closer, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Everything in me wanted to kick the door open, but I forced myself to be methodical. I unlocked the door quietly. My palms were sweaty, my breathing shallow. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside to see Sarah and Emily on the sofa, holding hands apparently mid-conversation. They both jolted upright at the sight of me. "Mark?" Sarah's voice trembled. She looked stunned, face turning pale. Emily's eyes darted to the floor as she let go of Sarah's hand. The silence stretched for a few excruciating seconds. "Hi, honey," I finally said, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. "I see you didn't go out for drinks after all." Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Emily rose to her feet, shifting uncomfortably. "Mark, I can explain," Sarah began, stumbling over her words. I let out a bitter laugh. "Explain what, exactly? That you've been sleeping with your best friend behind my back? That you two have lied to me over and over?" Emily winced at my tone. "It's not what you think." "Shut up," I snapped, my voice echoing through the living room, surprising even myself with its intensity. "I can't believe you both. How long has this been going on? Weeks, months, years?" Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. "Mark, please, don't make a scene." "Don't make a scene?" I repeated in disbelief. "You've broken my trust, betrayed our vows, and I walk in on you two here." I gestured at them both, trembling. "And you want me to stay calm?" Emily reached out tentatively, perhaps in an attempt to comfort Sarah or maybe even me. I recoiled. "Don't you dare," I hissed. "I trusted you as a friend." At that moment, all the anger, all the heartbreak, all the betrayal flooded through me. I was shaking, not just from rage, but from sorrow. I had envisioned thousands of scenarios if Sarah ever cheated, but none of them had prepared me for the reality of seeing her with Emily, the person I knew so well, the person I joked with, the person who had a key to our house and had been at every important event in our lives. Sarah stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Mark, listen to me. This just happened. We didn't plan it. We never wanted to hurt you." Emily nodded, wiping away her own tears. "We tried to fight it," she said softly, "but these feelings, they just grew. It's not about you. It's something between us." "Oh, so you expect me to understand?" I snapped, frustration coiling in my chest. "To just accept that my wife is in love with her best friend?" Sarah sobbed openly now, burying her face in her hands. She mumbled something I couldn't decipher. Then she looked up, eyes pleading with me to believe her. "I love you, Mark," she said, voice quivering. "But I also developed these feelings for Emily. It confused me at first, and I swear I never wanted to lie to you, but once it started, I didn't know how to stop. I felt like if I told you, you'd hate me." I stared at her in disbelief, the sting of her words cutting deeper than a knife. "You love me? But you're also in love with her? That's not how marriage is supposed to work, Sarah." At that, Emily stepped in, voice shaking. "Mark, if there was a way to handle this better, we should have. This wasn't fair to you. I'm so sorry. We didn't intend for it to happen. We tried to resist, but—" She trailed off, and I realized they were both in tears, shaking with guilt, fear, maybe even regret. But that did little to soothe the fury roaring inside me. I pointed a trembling finger at Emily. "You betrayed my trust. I welcomed you into our home. You were practically family to us. If you had these feelings, you should have stayed away or told me instead of sneaking around like this." Sarah flinched at my words, trying to reach for me, but I backed away. "Don't touch me," I muttered, the heartbreak echoing in my every word. The next minutes were a blur of accusations, apologies, sobs, and raised voices. We all tried talking at once, each of us drowning in emotions that no single conversation could resolve. Finally, I demanded Emily leave. "Get out of my house," I growled, barely containing my anger. "I can't look at you right now." Emily hesitated, glancing at Sarah with sorrowful eyes. "I'll go," she said quietly. "But please, Mark, I truly am sorry." She walked out the door, leaving Sarah and me alone in the living room. The silence was deafening. Sarah sank to her knees, sobbing. I stood there, numb. I wanted to comfort her, some twisted instinct of love and protectiveness. But I also wanted to scream at her. My entire world was upside down, and I had no idea how to fix it, or if it was even possible to fix. Later that night, after hours of tension and minimal conversation, Sarah finally found the courage to sit across from me at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, makeup streaked. She looked exhausted. "Mark," she said, voice trembling, "you deserve the truth. All of it. Emily and I, this didn't just start a few weeks ago. It's been about 6 months." I inhaled sharply. "Half a year," I echoed. "You've been lying to me for half a year." She nodded, tears threatening to fall again. "I'm so sorry. It started out as just emotional support. We'd always confided in each other, but things changed. We started talking about deeper things, about our sexuality, our desires. And then one night it just happened." I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "And you never thought to tell me? To consider my feelings? We're married, Sarah. How could you do this to me?" Her bottom lip quivered. "I know I messed up. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. I kept hoping it would stop. But then it kept getting stronger. I didn't want to lose you or Emily." I let out a hollow laugh. "Well, you might lose us both now." Silence settled between us like a heavy fog. She stared at her hands, fiddling with her wedding ring. The ring I had placed on her finger with all the love and hope in my heart. "What do you want me to do, Mark?" she whispered. "I'll do anything to make this right. I don't want to lose you." I looked at her, my pain mirrored in her eyes. Part of me wanted to throw her out, to end it right then and there. Another part of me clung to the memories, the love we shared, the life we built. Betrayal is never black and white. There are so many shades of heartbreak that can't be neatly categorized. I don't have an answer right now, I admitted. I just need space, Sarah. I need to figure out if I can ever trust you again. Over the next few days, I asked Sarah to move into the guest room while I processed everything. She respected my request. We still saw each other, exchanging awkward greetings in the hallway, navigating around each other in the kitchen. But a heavy tension shadowed every interaction. I avoided Emily entirely. She tried calling me, texting me, even emailing me, but I ignored everything. I didn't want to hear her excuses or apologies. I felt humiliated by both of them. I even considered telling our families or friends, but I wasn't ready to air this messy situation publicly. I was embarrassed, betrayed, and unsure of my next steps. Some nights I slept on the couch, staring blankly at the living room where I had watched them kissing on the camera feed. Other nights I'd wake up covered in sweat, plagued by nightmares of walking in on them again. I'd catch glimpses of Sarah's tear-streaked face peeking from the guest room door, but I couldn't bring myself to go to her. After about a week of this torturous limbo, I decided to leave the house. I packed a small bag and drove to a motel an hour away, needing time and distance. Sarah didn't fight me on it. She simply nodded, tears in her eyes, and asked me to stay safe. The look on her face spoke volumes about her regret, but in that moment, my own pain overshadowed hers. At the motel, I spent days in a haze of bitterness. I drank more than I should have, scrolled through photos of our happier times, and wondered if I was partly to blame. Had I neglected her somehow? Had I not been supportive enough? These questions churned inside me, mixing with my anger at Sarah's choices. Eventually, I realized I needed to confront Emily. I couldn't just bury my head in the sand forever. If nothing else, I wanted to understand why she did this, how she could betray a friend she had claimed to care about. One afternoon, I called Emily. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice trembled when she said, "Mark, I'm so glad you called. Please, can we talk?" "I'm at the Sunrise Cafe," I replied, naming a small place in a nearby town. "Come if you want to talk." Less than an hour later, she arrived. I was sitting at a corner table, nursing a black coffee that had long gone cold. She looked tired, her once vibrant eyes dull. She slid into the seat across from me, awkwardly folding her hands on the table. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said softly. "I know I'm the last person you want to be around." I sighed, resisting the urge to lash out. "I just want answers. How could you do this to me? To us?" Emily's gaze dropped to her hands. "Mark, I wish I had a simple explanation. Sarah and I grew close over the years, and I'd be lying if I said I never felt anything for her. But it was always just a small spark, and I respected your marriage. I never planned to act on it. But 6 months ago, that spark turned into a flame. We were both going through rough patches. She was stressed from work, and I was lonely. One night, we had a few drinks and confessed our feelings to each other. It just happened." I shook my head. "And you thought sneaking behind my back for 6 months was the best solution?" Tears formed in her eyes. "I know it wasn't. We were selfish. We didn't want to hurt you, so we kept it hidden, which only made it worse. I hate how this all turned out. I hate that I've caused you so much pain." For a moment, I studied her face. Emily, the daring, free-spirited friend I once admired. Now she just looked like a broken shell of that person. She looked genuinely remorseful, but remorse doesn't erase betrayal. "So, what now?" I finally asked, voice trembling slightly. "Do you love her? Does she love you? Am I just an obstacle?" Emily flinched at my words. "I don't know, Mark. I care about her deeply, and she cares about me, but she also loves you. She's torn." "Torn?" I echoed bitterly. She made her choice the moment she slept with you. Emily's tears spilled over. I'm sorry. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. I want you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. And if you choose to forgive Sarah, I'll respect whatever boundaries you set from now on. I exhaled, feeling both numb and deeply wounded. Emily, you need to stay away for now. That's the only boundary I can set. She nodded, wiping her tears. I understand. I'll do whatever you need. Just take care of yourself, okay? You don't deserve this. With that, she stood and walked out of the cafe. I watched her leave, a bitter swirl of emotions raging inside me. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and strangely, an odd sense of relief that I'd finally confronted her. When I returned home a few days later, Sarah was waiting for me in the living room. She looked exhausted and hopeful all at once. Mark, she whispered, standing up hesitantly. Can we talk? I nodded, too tired for anger. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the same couch where I had caught her and Emily's deception on camera. We let a heavy silence drape over us before Sarah finally spoke. I want to be honest with you, she said. I'm not sure what I feel for Emily. There's an undeniable connection, but I never wanted to destroy our marriage. Part of me thinks I just got caught up in a whirlwind that I didn't know how to stop. I raked my hands through my hair, feeling the weight of her words. Sarah, you realize how deeply you've hurt me, right? This isn't some passing mistake. It's a violation of trust that might never be restored. She nodded, tears brimming. I know. And I'm willing to do anything. Therapy, counseling, giving you all the space you need. I know I was selfish. I know I ruined what we had. But if there's any chance at saving this marriage, I want to fight for it. I love you. Her voice cracked on those last 3 words, and something in me stirred. Memories flooded in. Our wedding day, the vows, the laughter, the sense of partnership. How do you reconcile those beautiful moments with the agony of betrayal? Couples therapy, I said finally, my voice hoarse. We can try that. But I'm not promising anything, Sarah. If I feel like I can't heal, then that's it. I'm gone. She nodded vigorously. I understand. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for even considering it. That night, for the first time since the confrontation, we talked like 2 broken people trying to piece together a shattered mirror. We didn't have all the answers, but there was a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find some way forward, together or separately. Sarah scheduled a session with a local marriage counselor named Dr. Jacobs. Our first session felt like ripping off a bandage from a fresh wound. I sat there, arms crossed, while Sarah recounted how her emotional connection with Emily evolved into something physical. Dr. Jacobs listened intently, then turned to me. Mark, how does hearing that make you feel? I scoffed, looking away. How do you think? Betrayed, angry, disgusted? Sarah's lip trembled. I'm sorry, she whispered, for what felt like the millionth time. Dr. Jacobs encouraged us to discuss our history, how Sarah and I fell in love, the good times we shared, the reasons we married in the first place. It brought back both sweet nostalgia and a piercing sense of loss. Because now, those memories were tainted. We dove deeper into our personal backgrounds. Sarah's confusion about her sexuality, the emotional gaps in our marriage, my own tendency to get lost in work and not always be emotionally present. We discovered that while the betrayal was huge, our relationship had been suffering from smaller cracks for a while. Does that excuse her actions? Absolutely not. But it shed light on a bigger picture, one riddled with complexities that aren't easily categorized into victim and villain. After a few sessions, Dr. Jacobs suggested we each attend individual therapy as well. Sarah agreed eagerly, determined to explore her identity and figure out if her feelings for Emily were just a fleeting infatuation or a deeper orientation. I, on the other hand, needed to process my trauma, my anger, and my shattered trust. Over time, I noticed small changes in Sarah. She became more transparent, offering to show me her phone, telling me exactly where she was going. She stopped seeing Emily altogether. No texts, no calls, no social media interactions. From what I gathered, Emily was respecting the boundary I had set. Sarah also started making an effort to reconnect with me. Little gestures like making my favorite dinner, leaving me encouraging notes asking about my day in a way that felt genuine, not forced. Part of me still clung to anger, but another part of me appreciated her efforts. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. We started sharing more in therapy, acknowledging each other's fears and vulnerabilities. One night, after a particularly emotional session, we ended up hugging each other in the parking lot, both of us weeping. It felt like the first time in months we'd truly connected on a raw emotional level. No secrets, just raw honesty. But just when it seemed we were on a path towards possible reconciliation, life threw another curveball. Emily reached out to Sarah saying she couldn't move on without proper closure. She wanted to meet Sarah one last time, to talk through their feelings, to ensure there was no unfinished business. Sarah came to me with this request, tears in her eyes, asking for my permission. "I need to see her to end things properly," she said. "I want to make sure there's no confusion about where I stand. I love you, Mark, but I have to face her." My stomach knotted. This was the ultimate test of my fragile trust. The old fear flared up. What if seeing Emily stirred up those feelings again? But Dr. Jacobs had been telling us to confront issues directly rather than avoid them. Reluctantly, I agreed. "You have 1 hour," I said, trying not to let my voice quiver with insecurity. "And you meet in a public place. Then you come home to me." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her features. "Thank you. I promise. I'll be honest with you about everything that happens." They met at a coffee shop near our house. Sarah texted me when she arrived, letting me know she was there. I tried to distract myself by busying around the house, but my mind kept wandering to them, together. After 45 minutes, Sarah texted me again. "We're done here. I'm on my way home." When she walked through the door, I braced myself. She looked calm. Not devastated, not overjoyed, just emotionally tired. "How did it go?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She set down her purse and took a seat across from me. We talked it all out. Emily apologized again, and I apologized. We agreed it was a mistake that went too far. We acknowledged we do have a connection, but I told her it's not worth destroying my marriage. I nodded slowly, my heart pounding. "So, it's over." Sarah's eyes locked on mine. "Yes, it's over. I won't see her again, not like that." Tension seeped out of my chest, replaced by a cautious sense of relief. "Thank you," I said, "for being honest." In that moment, I realized that while the pain was still there, healing was possible. Maybe not guaranteed, but possible. We would have to rebuild trust from the ground up, and it would take months, maybe years, to truly overcome what happened. But at least now, we were on the same page. The next few weeks were a blur of therapy sessions, heartfelt conversations, and tentative steps toward intimacy. We started going on small dates again. Movie nights, walks in the park, dinners at quiet restaurants where we could talk without distractions. We rediscovered our shared love for hiking, something we hadn't done in over a year. During these outings, the topic of Emily inevitably surfaced. Each time, Sarah reassured me that she had no intention of rekindling anything with her. "I'm committed to us, Mark," she'd say, looking me in the eyes with a sincerity I hadn't seen in a long time. I found myself slowly peeling away layers of resentment. Forgiveness is tricky. It doesn't come all at once. You don't wake up one morning magically unhurt. It's a gradual process, one that involves a lot of introspection, tears, and heartbreak. Some days I'd think about the betrayal and feel my blood boil, only to later cool down and remind myself of the progress we'd made. Sarah, for her part, was consistent. She gave me access to her phone and social media, not because I demanded it, but because she wanted to show she had nothing to hide. She even changed jobs, claiming the old environment was part of the stress and negativity that had fueled her poor decisions. Whether that was true or not, I appreciated her willingness to start fresh. We continued with Dr. Jacobs, and eventually, she commended us on our efforts. "You two have shown resilience," she said. "But remember, trust is fragile. Keep communicating openly and honestly." Months passed, and the emotional scars began to form a faint tapestry of the lessons we'd learned. Sarah and I found ourselves laughing again, cooking together, and planning a small vacation up to the mountains. We were rebuilding the foundation of our marriage, this time with more transparency and a deeper understanding of our emotional needs. One evening, as we cuddled on the couch watching our favorite TV show, Sarah suddenly turned to me. "Mark," she said softly, "thank you for not giving up on us. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm so grateful you gave me a chance to make things right." I pulled her closer, my throat tight. "I won't lie, it still hurts sometimes thinking about what happened, but I see how hard you're working to mend this and I appreciate it. I love you, Sarah." She pressed her forehead against mine. "I love you too. Always." We kissed, and for the first time in what felt like ages, it didn't feel burdened by shame or suspicion. It felt hopeful. That night I slept in our bed next to my wife, no longer plagued by nightmares. I couldn't pretend everything was magically fixed, but I was at peace with the path we had chosen, to try and heal together. In the weeks and months that followed, we navigated the complexities of daily life with renewed vigilance. We took nothing for granted. Not our morning coffee chats, not our shared chores, not even our silly inside jokes. Every small moment of normalcy felt like a fragile gift that we protected fiercely. We knew the cost of losing it. I often reflected on what might have happened if I'd stormed out that first night and never looked back. Would I have been justified? Certainly. But would I have found closure? Or would I have spent my life wondering if we could have worked things out? I realize now that sometimes the hardest choice is to stay and fight for what you believe in, even when you have every reason to walk away. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day this betrayal will fade into a memory that only occasionally stings, or maybe there will always be a scar. But scars, as they say, are proof that we survived something painful and came out the other side. Sarah continues to be open about her journey of self-discovery. She talks more about her emotions, her fears, and the complexities she feels about her sexuality. I listen with empathy, knowing that we are forging a deeper bond through our honesty. We both agreed that if she ever feels unfulfilled or drawn to someone else again, she'll talk to me about it rather than hide it. It may be awkward, even painful, but it's better than living in a world of secrets. As for Emily, she moved to another state for a fresh start. We heard through mutual acquaintances that she's trying to focus on her art career. She sent an email to both Sarah and me, apologizing one last time and wishing us well. I haven't replied, and Sarah decided not to either. Perhaps in the far future, there might be a chance for some form of cordial relationship, but not anytime soon. Right now, our priority is each other, and that's where we stand today. Two people who were nearly destroyed by betrayal, yet chose to cling to hope. Our marriage isn't perfect. No marriage is, but it's ours, and we're determined to protect it. I once read a quote that said, "Every storm runs out of rain." That night, when I discovered Sarah's betrayal, it felt like the skies would never clear. But the storm did pass, and while the landscape of our relationship is forever changed, we're learning how to plant seeds of trust and love in the new soil left behind. If you've read this far, you might be wondering if I regret my choices. Part of me will always mourn the marriage we had before this infidelity, that simpler time when,